Hi everyone, this is audap. Let's continue our game of Chaos Head Noah running on Nintendo Switch. Genichi Narase stood in front of the window in the CEO's office on the top floor of the Nozomi Group building and lit his cigarette. The Nozomi Group, a massive corporate group with tight ties to the government and any number of smaller companies beneath it. Some of these child companies had begun in fields like clothing, foodstuffs, and imports, and gone on to achieve remarkable success. Norase was at the head of the group, and here he was in his castle, looking down at the scenery below him. But his mind was somewhere else, instead of enjoying the view. There was a mocking smile on his lips, but his feet were tapping impatiently on the floor.
まったく。老人たちの相手は面倒ですよ。そう思いませんか？彼らは臆病すぎる。だからこそ、ここまでのし上がってきた、とも言えるのでしょうが。利用するにも、こうあれこれと横槍を入れられては、いい加減うんざりしてきますよ。現実は悲しいかな。300人委員会の影響力というものを侮ることはできません。ただ、いずれ近いうちに、そのシステムも崩壊する。世界の支配構造は組み替えられる。楽しみですか？私もですよ。ここまで随分時間がかかってしまいました。プロジェクトノア。立ち上げからすでに5年余り。
Norase walked over to his desk. It was a heavy desk made of natural oak with very little on top of it. The few things that were there were business related. There was, however, one object lying on its corner that was very different than the others. Norase picked up the strange green character. He gave it a disinterested glance and tossed it in the wastebasket.
さて。
His narrow eyes were turned towards the dimly lit room. The moonlight from the window didn't reach to the far end. There was a faint sense, however, that someone was present there.
まさか、君がギガロマニアックスだとは思いもよりませんでした。どうやら、神すらも私の味方をしてくれているようだ。君のサンプルを取らせてもらいますよ。何？怯える必要はありません。私は元医師でしてね。インフォームドコンセントはきちんとしなければ気が済まないたちなのです。そもそもノア2のハードウェアはすでに完成しています。あと必要なのはソフトウェアの方でしてね。そのために君たちギガロマニアックスのサンプルが多く必要なのです。正確に言うならば NA シナプスに関するコードサンプル。脳の働きに指令を出す役割を果たしている部位の行動サンプルですよ。コードサンプルには個人差があります。持っている能力が高いギガロマニアックスは NA シナプスもより活性化し、脳のより広い範囲にわたって効果を及ぼします。人間の脳は全体の10分の1しか使われていません。しかし、ギガロマニアックスは違う。残りの10分の9の部位も使っていることが分かっています。ギガロマニアックスの頭の中というのは、実に興味深い。そのサンプルがノア2にとっていわば CPU の役割を果たすわけです。サンプルが多ければ多いほど、ノア2の能力は本物のギガロマニアックスに近づき、やがて超えるでしょう。納得してもらえましたか？結構。
Norase nodded, satisfied, and let out a puff of cigarette smoke as he turned back towards the window. Seen up close, Shibuya was a vulgar, disgusting city. Looking at it only brought him displeasure. But high up here, he always found it a more pleasant sight. Of course, it wouldn't be long before he'd never see it again, after his group's Project Noah performed its last experiment.
世界が生まれ変わる日も近い。
Lunchtime. I always skipped lunch. I hated eating by myself in the classroom. I didn't have anybody to eat with. Lately, Rimi had tried inviting me to eat with her, but I was always too embarrassed to say yes. Whenever lunchtime came around, I would always leave the class and escape somewhere more peaceful. Sometimes that would be the library, sometimes the courtyard. But ever since what happened at O-Front, the whole school knew my face. There was no place left where I could relax. I could feel them staring at me. I could hear their laughter and insults. Like I did every other day, I walked around the whole school and found no escape from them anywhere, just when I was thinking of hiding in the toilet. I saw Nanami walking away from me down the hallway to the first-year students' classrooms. She was walking back to class alone, it looked like. I realized I hadn't talked to her once since the incident. I'd been avoiding her for the past week. I mean, I'd have no idea what to say when I met her. I was a terrible brother. I'd chosen to save my life instead of saving hers. It was nothing more than a miracle that Nanami had been released. I'd done nothing at all. Maybe Shogun had told Nanami that it was my fault that she'd been kidnapped. If so, she'd definitely be mad at me. She might hate me now and not want to speak with me at all. I didn't have the courage to go talk to her. But after I'd happened to see her, I started to get worried, even though it was way too late. Had they done anything to her? Had they hurt her? Was she okay mentally? For a moment, the memories of that hand came back to me. But I shook my head. The severed hand, the bangle on the wrist, the phone. They were all a delusion, a very realistic delusion. I knew this for a fact because the hand had disappeared from my fridge. Instead of assuming it had disappeared, it was more natural to assume that it had never been there in the first place. Especially since Nanami was alive and here at school. I started to run after her without even realizing I was doing it. She was getting closer. Nanami hadn't noticed me yet. As she walked, she played with her hair with her right hand. I went to call out to her. As she played with her hair, the sleeve around her right hand fell back a little. I gulped back my words. I stopped. I'd seen something. It was something very small, almost unnoticeable, but something white, something wrapped, placed so that it wouldn't stand out. A bandage on her right wrist. Chapter 8, IR2. Bon arrived at Frisia's 30 minutes after the time Momose asked him to be there. Momose yelled at him as soon as he arrived. Bon shrugged and gave her a half-hearted smile as he walked over to her desk. He hadn't brought her any sweets today, a decision he was beginning to regret.
あら、つばちゃんは？
今日は別行動。
若い子をこき使って、ばんちゃんは楽してるわけね。
いやいや、俺もちゃんとやってるよ。昨日だって徹夜でいろいろ調べてたんだぜ。おかげで最近の女子高生の生態についてはかなり詳しくなった。
あんたね、呆れて物も言えないわ。
で、こうして俺を呼びつけたってことは、あの子と連絡取れたってこと？
今来てるわ。
さすが桃ちゃん。ちなみに可愛い子かい
Momose gave the grinning Bon a slap on the head. She put her wrist into it too, and it hurt pretty bad.
いつまでもバカなこと言ってんじゃないわよ、エロ親父。
冗談だって。
Bon had asked Momose for a favor. He'd wanted to talk to somebody involved in the NewGen cases directly and had asked Frisia to make it happen. His questions were, for the moment, not going to be directly linked to the police investigation. He couldn't talk to her in an official capacity, at least without someone somehow getting the rest of the team involved too. Momose headed for a corner of the office, motioned for Bond to follow her. There was a small space there, surrounded by shelves lined with files. This space served as a meeting room for talking with clients. There were 2 sofas, each with room for 2 people, and both far too big for the cramped little area. When Bond followed Momose inside, he saw a girl sitting there. She was wearing a Suume Academy uniform. Her shoulders were slumped, and she was looking down. She looked exhausted.
ごめんね。お待たせしちゃって。
The girl looked up in surprise as Momose spoke. Her glasses slid on her nose a little, forcing her to push them back into place with her fingers.
いえ、平気です。
She looked a little scared as she bowed shallowly to Bon. He was kind of hurt by this. Bon always tried his hardest to try and come off as unthreatening. He realized, though, that he must still be giving off the intimidating air of a professional police officer, though. It's something he would have to keep working on, he realized.
楠木優愛さんだね。
はい。
亡くなった美愛さんの双子の姉。それで間違いないかな。
Yua flinched a little before nodding. The first NewGen case was the group dive. One of the victims who jumped was a girl named Mia Kusunoki.
まあ、そんな緊張しなさんな。君を取り調べようなんて思っちゃねえんだ。雑談程度に思ってよ。本題に入る前にちょっと聞いていいかい？ゆあちゃんは妹さんが亡くなったことについてどう思う？
ちょっとバンちゃん。
あ、悪いね。職業病ってやつか。気を使うような言い方できなくってな。ただ気になってたんだ。捜査本部でも話題になってたんだが、楠木美愛さんの遺族は奇妙だって。
ばあちゃん！
いえ、いいんです。
Momose had almost leapt out of her chair at Bond's rude question, but Yua herself stopped her.
私もおかしいって思いますから。
ああ。
集団ライブで飛び降りた5人には自殺する理由なんてなかった。家族や友人はみんなそう主張している。だがミアさんの家族だけは違った。
Bond took his fan out of his belt and began to wave it at his face.
何も主張しなかった。あっさり受け入れたって聞いてる。あまりに何も言わなさすぎて奇妙だったってな。なんでだい？
お父さんもお母さんもミヤちゃんが死んでからおかしくなっちゃったんです。
There was pain in her voice.
最初はミヤちゃんの事件の知らせを受けた日はそれでも泣いていたんです。お父さんもお母さんもとても辛そうでした。でも次の日の朝、なぜか二人は楽しそうに笑っていたんです。ミヤちゃんが死ぬ前と全く同じに戻ってたんです。たった一日で。私、わけがわからなくて、二人はミヤちゃんのこと忘れようとしてるんじゃないかって思って。そうしたらお父さんが笑いながら、お前に妹なんていないよって。ミヤちゃんが残した洋服とか靴とかを見せても全然取り合ってくれないんです。それはお前のために予備で買ってあったものだって。そうやってお父さんたちはニュースからも警察の話からも目を背けて、記憶からミヤちゃんのことを消し去ろうとしてるんです。
つまり双子じゃなかったことに？
それで警察にもうちは一人っ子だって言って追い返してたわけか。
私とミヤちゃんは一卵性で見た目は瓜二つなんですけど、あの子は、妹は親から嫌われていました。あの子はいつも自分の気持ちを押し殺して 私のことを一番に考えてくれていたんです。
As Yua talked, she remembered her old life. For example, one year when she was in elementary school, her parents had bought a present, a single giant stuffed bear. Yua was excited, but Mia said she didn't like stuffed animals and ignored it. Her parents had disliked how Mia refused to act like a little child should. Still, Yua had quietly offered to share the stuffed animal with her, but Mia had refused. I don't need a stuffed animal. You can have it, was all she said. A month or so later, though, when Yua had gotten tired of the stuffed animal, she'd woken late at night to see something surprising. Mia was holding the stuffed bear and talking to it with such a happy look on her face. Yua had never seen her sister look so happy. It was only then that Yua realized her sister was lying about not wanting the bear. She'd been lying so that her sister could have it all to herself. The next day, Yua looked under Mia's pillow and found a cute picture of a bear she'd drawn. Mia had been sleeping with it in her arms until Yua got tired of the stuffed animal. Things like that happened over and over again for the past 18 years. It was always Yua who blew out the candles on the birthday cake. Mia would say, "That's stupid, I'm not doing it," and her parents would get angry. Yua made it into Suume Academy, a private school, but Mia had deliberately behaved badly in class, lowering her grades and making sure she got sent to the public one. Her parents hadn't had the money to send both of them to private schools. No matter what Yua tried to do for Mia, Mia would always put her sister first, even if it meant making other people hate her.
私は結局、ミヤちゃんの優しさに甘えて、今まで自分だけいい思いをしてきました。ミヤちゃんがいなくなって初めて、もっとあの子のために何かできることがあったはずだって、すごく後悔して、私が代わりに知ってあげればよかった。しかも挙句に、親に存在そのものを忘れられてしまうなんて、こんなの、あんまりです。あんまりにも、悲しいです。
That was all the talking she could do. She took off her glasses and put her hands over her eyes, and as she began to cry, Momose sat next to her, kindly patting her on the back.
それでユアちゃんは一人で事件のことを調べていたらしいの。ミヤちゃんに一体何があったのか知るためにね。
そりゃあ大変だったろう。
そして一人の人物を突き止めた。
あ？
Momose looked over to Bon, still holding Yua close.
西条匠くんよ。
なるほどね。
Bon stroked the stubble on his chin and leaned forward.
いつだったか西条と追跡劇をしてたっていう女子高生の話を所轄のデカから聞いたんだが、もしかしてユアちゃんだったりする？
She nodded at him apologetically.
ああ、興味あるな。詳しく聞かせてもおうと思ったけど、ちょっとごめんよ。
Bon chuckled and bobbed his head at Yua and Momose. He'd been cut off by the sound of his phone ringing from within his suit pocket. He quickly took it out and looked at the LCD screen. It was showing Sua's name.
もしもし、どうした？
先輩、7番目っす。
なんだと？
Sua's voice was tense. Bon could hear the sound of other police officers frantically running around him. From the sound of it, Sua was at the station.
ニュージェネ第7の事件が起きたんすよ。
Bon's eyes went wide, and then he bit his lip. bitterly. Momose and Yua could tell by his demeanor that something had happened and were looking at him worried.
外車は3人、友人同士らしいっす。3人とも胴体から体が切断されてて、それぞれの上半身と下半身を別々に入れ替えてテグス、釣りとっすね。それで縫い付けられてたっす。それと額にそれぞれ Q、D、N って読める傷が。
何かのメッセージか。
さあ、そこまでは。それと気になることが。司法解剖の結果分かったんすけど、外車の胴体の切断部はノコギリとか包丁とかそういう刃物で切断されたものじゃないって。
どういう意味だ。
なんか強い力で引きちぎられたそうっす。
引きちぎられた。
Bond repeated that to himself as he scratched his head roughly with the hilt of the fan.
まるで怪獣だな。あるいは最近流行りの魔法使いとかな。
先輩、それマジで言ってんすか？映画オタクの自分でもさすがにその意見には同意しかねるっす。
単なる例えだ、バカな。いいからさっさと捜査に戻れ。
He hung up the phone. Interesting, they got sewn up back together. The sun started setting earlier once November came. By the time I was ready to go home with Rimi after class, a pale orange color was settling over the sky.
ごめんね。
Rimi had been silent until then, but suddenly she apologized.
たく、いろいろ大変だったんでしょ。
It was the first time in a while we'd gone home together. I was so happy she'd come back. She'd offered to go home with me today again for one thing. We'd only gone home together twice now, so I was afraid she might want to stop, but that didn't happen.
一緒にいてあげられなくてごめん。知り合いが例の地震で怪我しちゃって、ずっと面倒見てたから。
Rimi brought up the subject even though I hadn't asked. But to be honest, I wasn't even hearing most of what she was saying. That bandage I'd seen on Nanami's wrist at lunch, I couldn't get it out of my mind.
もしかして怒ってる？
I'd missed my chance to talk to her then. Well, no, I'd gotten scared. Nanami was my little sister. I was her big brother. But something felt so strange. The nurse had said Nanami wasn't hurt. The hand that Shogun had sent me had disappeared from the fridge in the base. It was all supposed to be a delusion. So why would she have a bandage around her right hand? Maybe I was just overthinking things and she'd gotten burnt or had a nasty bug bite. That had to be it. Right? That was the most sensible answer, right? But I was still afraid of finding out. I hadn't been able to help her, but here I was, too gloomy to even talk to her. I was a really awful big brother.
ねえ、タク。おーい。もしもーし。怒ってるならそう言ってよ。無視されるのって結構傷ついちゃうな。
I looked at Rimi. She was sad.
もしかして、私の話聞いてなかった？
I hesitated a moment before nodding. She poked a finger into my cheek and pushed.
石？てっきり無視されたかと思ったよ。紛らわしいことしない。
Ah, her nail. Her nail was digging into my skin.
大丈夫？
Mimi whispered, finally pulling back her hand. Yeah, that was always what she said when she was worried about me.
お昼ぐらいから顔色良くないよ。元気もないみたいだし。もしかして誰かにひどいこと言われた？だったら私に教えて。怒ってきてあげるから。
She was like a big sister, or my mom. Mimi could be pretty nosy. Well, she'd have to be if she could care about a weird loser like me. I appreciated the fact that she was worried about me. Until now, whenever I'd had a problem, my only options were to keep it to myself or write an anonymous post on 8chan. Maybe I should ask her about Nanami. But when I'd asked her about the D-sword, she hadn't believed me at all. She'd reacted just like any sensible person would. If I told her, she'd either laugh it off or be freaked out. If that was the case, it'd be a waste of time to try. All I needed from Mimi was for her to be by my side. I could ask Kozupi or Senna for help with this problem instead. Rimi whispered in exasperation as she stepped inside the base. But despite her complaints, she seemed happy, so I couldn't tell what she was really thinking.
変わってないな。この部屋の汚さがまさにタクって感じ。
If it's that bad, then you can clean it. I sighed and turned on the computer.
ちょっと。帰ってくるなりパソコン？友達が来てるんだから、少しはおもてなししてあげようっていう気持ちにはならないのかな。ねえ、お話ししようよ。
Mimi asked me for the impossible as she sat down on my sofa. If I tried to have a one-on-one chat with a 3D girl, I'd run out of things to discuss almost instantly. Lately, I'd had more chances to talk to Rimi and had started to get used to talking to her, but I still wouldn't last even 5 minutes. As of right now, my head was full with thoughts of Nanami, and I didn't feel up to having a cheerful conversation. I'm sure it would look like I was ignoring her. I sat down in my chair, feeling like a pathetic loser.
おっと、ここまで行ったのになおも無視しますか。
I could hear Rimi standing up. She walked over to me and grabbed the toy D-sword off the table. Ignoring my confusion, she raised it high above her head.
そんなタクにはこうだ。
And then she brought down the sword. Of course, she was just joking, instead of being serious, but the tip of the sword was stabbing into my neck. She began to whack me on the head with it, and when I tried to brush it away, she skillfully dodged my hand.
ねえ、もっと楽しいことしようよ。じゃないと本気で切っちゃうぞ。
楽しいことって。
Rimi was bringing down the sword to chop my head off. She paused in mid-strike and thought.
じゃあゲームとか。ほら、タクは得意でしょ。対戦ゲームしようよ。私そういうのやったことないから、いろいろ教えてほしいな。
Unfortunately, the only games I had were H games and ESO. Neither of them had two-player mode.
無理だよ。ソフトがなくて。
I grabbed the sword by the blade and pushed it away. Rimi pouted, upset, and put the sword back where it had been.
だって、せっかく久しぶりに会えたのに。
I appreciated the sentiment, but right now I just didn't feel like having fun with Rimi.
メールだよ。ボケなす。あ、今の何？
あ、いや。
Rimi had just heard my Sedaton email voice, and that was really embarrassing. I opened my email program and saw 3 messages from Grim telling me to get my ass in the chat room. I realized that I hadn't chatted with Grim in a while. We used to talk all the time. But since I'd been staying off ESO, I hadn't talked for about 10 days. Nightheart entered the room. Current members too. Hey. Hey, Nightheart. I've been waiting. We got a nice guy. We got a new nice guy. We've got what? Too lazy to find AA. Dude, NewGen. NewGen equals nice guy. NewGen NG nice guy. That shouldn't be hard to figure out, right? Anyway, it's here. The 7th murder.
どうしたの？
Remy must have noticed my surprise because she stood up and came over next to me. She peered at the monitor from over my shoulder.
第7の事件。
Another one. Another NewGen murder. How long was this going to keep happening? Would the next one be the one where they finally got me? Or the one after that?
タク、気にすることないよ。何も怖いことなんてない。タクは狙われたりなんかしない。全部タクの被害妄想。ね。
She was trying to cheer me up, but she had no evidence at all. That's not going to make me feel better, Remy. Anyway, had Grim gotten a job at the NewGen advertising division or something? He was constantly telling me about them whenever one happened. Once again, he posted a bunch of links to the news sites. This must have been his way of telling me to look at them. I clicked the link and bit down hard on my lip. Seventh NewGen case, DQ and puzzle. At 4:50 a.m. on the 4th, bodies of 3 men were found hanging from a transmission tower along the train tracks in Shibuya Ward, Tokyo. The bodies belonged to 3 Shibuya residents, a college student named Sabura Anzawa, a part-time worker named Ryo Takagi, and Koihei Fujita, who was unemployed. A police investigation revealed that the bodies of all 3 had been severed at the waist, and that the cut did not appear to have been made cleanly, as if by a blade. The lower and upper halves of the deceased were attached to different bodies, sewn together with sturdy thread. The letters D, Q, and N were found on their foreheads, which the police believe may be a message from the killer. Pictures of the crime scene were uploaded to @Channel, a major internet message board, before the media's reports, and it's already being called the seventh in the so-called New Generation Madness cases. Users of the board have named it the DQN puzzle due to the way the bodies of the victims were. DQN is a word used to refer to a thug or a person who lacks common sense. Some members of the families are preparing to take legal action against certain inappropriate comments by @Channel users, and reaction online has been mixed. A new NewGen. Lol, DQN lol. This isn't NewGen, the cops are idiots. 920. You're trying to say that we DQN hating @channelers are behind it? The way they rip the bodies apart and put them back together is kind of like a puzzle. I wish they'd replace my top half with that of a hot guy. Get that fake psychic Nishijo to tell you who's behind it, lol. It's the NewGen madness and I can't bear it. Group dive, pregnant man, crucified, vampire, brain dead, yummy hand, DQN puzzle.
今日午前4時50分ごろ、東京都渋谷区の線路沿いで男性3人の他殺死体が鉄柱に吊り下げられているのを通りかかった新聞販売員の男性が発見しました。警察の調べによりますと、殺されたのはいずれも渋谷区に住む無職藤田康平さん、大学生の安沢三郎さん、とび職の高木亮さんの3人です。3人とも胴体の部分が切断され、それぞれの上半身と下半身が別々に入れ替えられて糸で縫合されていました。
But there's 3 of them. How'd that work out exactly, switching the pieces?
3人の額にはそれぞれ謎の傷がつけられており、警察では犯人からのメッセージではないかとみて調べています。渋谷では2ヶ月ほど前から猟奇殺人事件が頻発しており、警察では今回の事件も同一犯による犯行の可能性が高いとみて捜査を続けています。
The last video I saw showed the faces of the 3 murdered men. I recognized their faces.
あいつらだ。
知ってるの？
昨日僕に絡んできた。
I gave them my wallet, but they still attacked me anyway. I passed out, and when I woke up, Kozupi was there. The three of them were covered in blood. I took my wallet out of my pocket and stared at it. When I'd woken up, Kozupi was holding my wallet, and she'd given it back to me. Could she be the one who... No, that wasn't right. When I'd seen them last, their faces were smashed up, and they were covered in blood, but they certainly weren't sliced in half. They'd been killed after Kozupi and I had left. It had to be Shogun. He was taunting me. He was trying to destroy my mind. I felt like I was about to throw up. My stomach was racked with pain. I put my hands up against it hard to try to make it go away. Would I be next? Would the next one finally be the one where I was killed?
終了。
A hand reached out from behind me and flicked the switch on the monitor. The screen went black.
落ち着いて。気にすることないよ。ただの偶然だって、きっと。
How could Remy be so calm? There was no way this could all be just a coincidence.
それより、お腹空いちゃった。ねえ、私が行きつけのお店があるんだけど、そこにご飯食べに行かない？安くて美味しいんだよ。私が保証する。まあ、お客さんはおじさんが多いから、私みたいのが一人で行くのはちょっと恥ずかしいけどね。あ、それと、駅の中に入らなくちゃいけないんだった。渋谷駅の構内にあるから。ちなみに、山手線内回りと外回りのホーム、どっちにもあるんだけど、私は断然内回りの方が好き。
Dinner, huh? I didn't feel like eating at all. I felt like there was a knife in my throat. Like somebody was saying they could kill me at any time. Please, just leave me alone. What did I ever do to you? I'm just so tired of this all. Ayase Kishimoto was staring out the window, only half paying attention to anything going on around her. There were no bars on the windows like they were in the rooms at Arkhart Medical, the place where she'd been before. Outside, she could see the high-rise buildings of Shinjuku, and beyond them, a blazing evening sky. A few pigeons were flapping their wings furiously as they crossed the sky. Occasionally, she would wince in pain. Her eyes were empty and just a little tired. Her lips weren't humming the songs that had so entranced the young people of Shibuya. After her failed suicide attempt, she'd been brought to a big general hospital in Yoyogi. Her wounds had almost completely healed. The doctor had said it was a miracle that a fall from that height had ended only in a few minor scrapes and bruises. Still, she'd hit her head hard, and she'd been hospitalized for observation. She'd been here over a week already. Of course, observation meant nothing more than a simple checkup once every 2 days. The rest of the time, she was left alone. She had the room to herself. There were no other beds in it. Her D-sword was up against the window. It was flashing with a pale light. It had been there the whole time, but nobody had noticed it. She didn't get many visitors. Phantasm fans were, supposedly, coming in huge numbers every day, but the hospital had banned them from seeing her so they wouldn't bother the other patients. She and her family weren't closed. Almost nobody else came to see her. Her bandmates had come to see her once. When she'd brought up breaking up the band, though, they'd stopped coming at all.
岸本さん、体温計ピピってなりました？
The door opened and a nurse in white came in. Ayase slowly turned towards her, then took the thermometer out from under her arm like she'd just remembered it was there. The nurse looked at the number on the digital display and wrote it down on the chart.
37度1分と。ちょっと熱っぽいかしら。ズキズキする。頭。
Ayase winced in pain again.
あら、また頭痛？でもそれは薬の副作用よ。気にしなくてもそのうち良くなりますよ。
The nurse smiled as she spoke and took the thermometer. Her expression was gentle, and there was something about her that put a patient at ease. But Ayase put her hand on her forehead and shook her head. Ever since she came here, Ayase had been dealing with a dull headache. Painful wasn't the word for it, but there was an unpleasant sensation of something pulsing in her head. It was making it hard for her to think, and her whole body felt as heavy as lead. This had happened to Ayase before, too. It was when she was at Arc Heart Medical. The headaches had lasted 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. She'd been unable to sleep and emotionally unstable. It was a past she didn't want to remember, a past she'd sealed away, her memories of 2 years ago. The pain was the trigger that made them come back in flashes. A dark room, a small window with bars. Except for the small window, the walls were entirely covered with mirrors. She'd been restrained in a steel chair in the center of the room. There was some kind of device on her head, with cords streaming out of it. Her hands were bound behind the chair's back. Her head was restrained and tilted up at a slight angle. There was no one else in the room. The only sounds were her panting for air and the straining of the metal chair. Drool flew from her lips, and a bestial howl came from her throat that one would have thought impossible for a girl her age. It was a very quiet form of torture. There was only one thing they were doing to her. A single drop of water was falling on her forehead from above, in the same spot every time, at exact 5-second intervals. And that was all. She'd been stuck like that for 2 days with no rest, and now all she could think of was when the next drop would fall. Her senses were pushed to the limits. Each time a drop fell, it felt like every nerve in her body was being ripped apart, like all the bones in her body were being shattered, like a long, sharp awl was being driven into her skull, like all the fluids in her body, blood included, were freezing, like all of her skin was rotting and sloughing off. It was more than enough to drive her mad. She snapped back to reality and found herself panting and clutching the sheets tightly. Her whole body had started to shake when her dark memories came back. The nurse had gone from her room. It was dinner time, and there was a frantic rush of movement outside the doors. Ayase repeated the words that the nurse had said to herself. Was this headache really caused by the medicine, or had she hit her head when she'd fallen, or was it an effect of her old memories? She couldn't tell. Ayase wiped away the sweat on her forehead and began to laugh.
構わないわ。今さら何をされたって。あれはあの神罰を耐え抜いたんだから。もう迷わない。私は。
She whispered as if in a trance. Then suddenly she heard a sound coming from the hallway. It was the pleasant sound of shoes on linoleum. They weren't the nurse's shoes, she could tell that much. The footsteps were getting closer to her room. There was a knock at the door. She pressed her lips together tightly in a frown.
失礼します。
It was a man. He was holding a fruit basket, the type commonly given as gifts. Ayase recognized the man. Thus she looked at him suspiciously.
どうも。あ、別に怪しいもんじゃないっすよ。自分は。
知ってるわ。
He was a detective with the Tokyo Metropolitan Police. He'd once been tailing her as a person of interest in the NewGen case. He scratched his head cheerfully. For a detective, he seemed surprisingly laid back.
いやー、嬉しいっす。君みたいな美人に覚えててもらえて。記憶力いいんすね。
The detective walked towards her bed. Ayase glanced at the D-sword on the windowsill. It was too far away for her to reach out and grab.
今日はお見舞いに来たんすよ。
そうは思えないわ。目的は？
鋭いっすね。
The detective acted like he was shaken, but it felt a little like an act.
まあ、ちょっと綾瀬ちゃんに聞きたいことがあって。あ、これ、よかったら食べてほしいっす。
He offered her the fruit basket with an innocent smile, practically forcing her to take it by placing it at the foot of her bed.
うまいっすよ。あと、高かった。
いらない。
まあそう言わず、せっかく買ってきたんで。後でお母さんが来た時にでも切ってもらって。しまった。綾瀬ちゃんはもう何年も両親に会ってないんだったっすね。
It was clear that the detective knew exactly what he was doing, but Ayase didn't really care. Her parents had disowned her when she was very little. They were the type to really care about what the neighbors thought of them, and Ayase was a problem child that they were eager to be rid of. She wasn't entirely cut off from them, though. They sent her enough money to cover her living expenses every month.
申し訳ないっす。
He gave her a little bob of his head in apology. Ayase was only now starting to recover from her flashback earlier, and didn't really want to talk to the detective at all. She decided to get this over with as fast as possible.
聞きたいことって何？アリバイ？
違うっすよ。それは前に散々聞いたし。もう綾瀬ちゃんの容疑は晴れたっす。君は白、真っ白。
目星はついたの？犯人の。
それは教えられないんすよ。捜査上の秘密っす。
匠。
秘密っす。
The detective was grinning. He was clearly hiding something. When he laughed, you could really see just how young he was.
しかし西条くんは不思議な少年っすね。彼を見ていると殺人の容疑者にはとても見えない。もしあれで本当に犯人だったとしたら、まさに人の皮をかぶった悪魔っす。
まだ容疑者なのね、彼。
いや、そういうわけじゃないっすよ。
The detective laughed and shook his head.
ああ、今の話誰にも言っちゃダメっすからね。情報漏洩すると上司に怒られるんすよ。まあ当然なんすけど。この前も先輩のとばっちりで怒られたばっかで。綾瀬ちゃんも一度会ってると思うんすけど、覚えてるかな。バンさんっていう髪がボサボサで不精ひげ生やしたおっさんでか。
Ayase remembered him. When they'd come to talk to her, it was the older man, not the one in front of her, who'd done most of the speaking. He'd been pretty aggressive and sneaky, too.
あの人がすぐこのバカって怒鳴るんすよ。そのくせ自分は本来の捜査をせずに、なんだかわけのわからないことばっか調べてて、挙句の果てに自分まで無理やり付き合わされて、最近胃が痛いんすよね。いや、まあ根はいい人っすし、勘が異常に鋭い人で、過去にも難事件をいくつか解決に導いたらしいんすけどね。
その話をするためここに来たのは。
The detective chuckled when Ayase cut him off.
ああ、いや、申し訳ないっす。つい愚痴入っちゃったっすね。今の話は全面的に内緒にしてほしいっす。諏訪守、一生のお願いっすよ。
それで
一つ目は、なんであんなことを？
Even Ayase could tell he was talking about how she'd jumped off the roof.
もう何度も話したわ、他の刑事さんに。
邪神王グラジオールの復活を阻止するためですか？
死ぬつもりなんてなかった。魂を一つ上のステージに持っていこうとしただけよ。
例の若者の間で話題になった君の歌についても似たようなこと言ってたっすよね。
This was his second question. Ayase sighed a little.
ニュージェネのことを歌ったものなんかじゃないわ、あの詩は。グラジオール記目視録詩編のインスピレーションを受けて作った第3章102節よ。世界に邪神王グラジオールが現れようとしている。復活を阻止するにはグラジオールが流した黒い血によって作られた7つの杭が必要。杭は剣へと形を変え、神罰を乗り越えた7人の黒騎士の手に渡る。目には目を、 歯には歯を。邪神を背負うし人間だけが邪神王を滅ぼせるのよ。
なんか映画みたいっすね。そういう壮大な設定は好きっす。
Ayase's eyes narrowed at the detective's comment.
設定じゃないわ。現実よ。
じゃあ最後の質問っす。
The detective ignored her protest, but she was used to that. Nobody had ever believed what she had to say.
君や西条くんの他にも水明の生徒について何人か洗ったんすけどね。
He crossed his arms and let out a little sigh. It felt like an obvious act, but Ayase wasn't inclined to call him out.
何？
すごくバカバカしい質問なんすけど、刑事が質問するようなことじゃないんすよね、本当は。子供じみてるっていうか。
そう。質問する気がないなら出て行って。頭が痛いの。
いや、実はね、バンさんが妙なことを言い出してるんすよ。君たちは魔法使いなんじゃないかって。
Ayase's eyes narrowed just a little at the phrase, you guys.
違いますよね。
使えるわ。
She looked down at her hands instead of at the detective as she spoke.
綾瀬ちゃんって面白い子っすね。
でも、ニュージェネはグラジオールの騎士とは無関係。
そうっすか。まあどうでもいいんすけどね。
The detective yawned, disinterested in his words. And then suddenly an electric sound filled the room. The detective frantically pulled a phone out of his suit pocket.
まずった。病院って携帯禁止なんすよね。電源オフにしておくの忘れてた。うわ、しかも女からだし。付き合って4年になるラブラブの彼女がいるんすよ。
He grinned as he pressed the button to reject the call. He turned back towards Ayase.
綾瀬ちゃんは映画見るっすか？スパークウォーズって知らない？それに出てくるダース・スパイダー伯爵のテーマなんす。今のメロディー。
She wasn't interested in movies at all. Ayase had already decided she was under no obligation to answer any more of his questions and silently turned to look out the window.
実は自分スパークウォーズオタクなんすよ。興味ないっすか？そりゃ失礼したっす。じゃ自分はこれで。
The detective left the room without waiting for her answer. Ayase didn't bother to watch him as he went. Her eyes were watching the sky as it shifted from twilight to azure night.
このボケナス、ずっと待ってたんだからね。
Alright, why don't we stop it there? This is Autopostrophe. You've been watching Chaos Head Noah running on Nintendo Switch. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.